Ready Jim, Kipper Weekly Report, April 4th, Voter ID. The Georgia voter ID law that was passed a couple of weeks ago has created consternation amongst a number of different groups. Progressives, of course, and now a couple of corporations have joined in. Georgia-based Delta Airlines and Coca-Cola Corporation have spoken out against the legislation, calling it racist, though not really presenting any facts or basis for that other than they want to be woke, and it's woke to call the law racist. Because Delta Airlines know a lot about voter ID since they ask people to present an ID when they buy a ticket, and yet that's not racist. So they're going to have to answer to that question, I would think, too. I'm sure Coca-Cola requires ID if you want to visit their corporate headquarters in Atlanta. So Major League Baseball has also joined in and pulled the All-Star game from the Atlanta Braves that were going to host it this year. And I'll have to see what the ramifications of that are for baseball fans. But I've seen a number of people speaking out against it, calling out Major League Baseball for joining on the bandwagon without really any facts behind it. What was the reason for the law? Well, it's to close a number of the loopholes that there are in the Georgia law as far as not having to present ID based upon a number of the potential fraud issues that arose in the 2020 election. Not that I'm saying there was fraud, but there were a number of unanswered incidents that did not go completely explained. So this is just something that is being done to close those loopholes. Remember, 34 states already, 2/3 of the states in the United States, have voter ID laws. President Biden called it a return to Jim Crow laws, which is interesting because the voting restrictions in Delaware are far more stringent than they are in Georgia. So I'm not sure what he's done in Delaware all these years to make it less of a Jim Crow state. But hey, we'll see. This is something that's run more on hyperbole and lack of fact and emotion than it has on any factual information. We published a pretty good article out there on common sense answers about voter ID and who you would be and what exactly you would have and have not done if you are a person who does not have a valid voter ID, not just for the state of Georgia, but for anybody in America. So it's a pretty extensive list, and you're pretty far out there if you don't have voter ID as far as any sort of interaction with anything, including you would not be able to fly on an airplane, or if you're Major League Baseball, you would not, or if you're part of the Major League Baseball game, you would not have been able to pick up tickets at will call because that requires a voter ID, or it requires an ID, a state-issued ID according to Major League Baseball. So, as does most of Europe require voter ID to vote. So this is something that's not going to go away, but it'll be interesting to see how much of the emotional case that this is being made runs up against the factual things. I have a hunch that Major League Baseball will back it down and return the game to Georgia, but that's just a hunch I've got that when this fervor blows over and they find there's a real lack of facts on their side, that they may have to kind of apologize for jumping the gun a little quickly on this one. But never question the ability of a company to stand on wokeness regardless of the lack of facts backing them. All right, second is the Capitol Hill attack. We had another attack on Capitol Hill this week. A follower of Louis Farrakhan, African-American gentleman with some mental health issues, it appears, claiming that the American government was out to get him as part of a CIA plot for attacking all African Americans. Rammed his car into a barrier and unfortunately, tragically killed a Capitol Hill police officer. In the attack, he tried to then attack people with knife, where he became a collector of lead and died at the scene, shot by Capitol Hill police. You have to wonder, though, how the story so quickly disappeared from the press. Well, why would that be? Well, this doesn't fit the narrative. The narrative is Trump supporters with hundreds or thousands of automatic weapons storming the Capitol. Well, they didn't have automatic weapons, and whether they're Trump supporters, we're still determining whether how accurate that was. If it is, then they go to jail. Doesn't matter who they support. You do something wrong, you go to jail, just like this guy. Played the wrong game, unfortunately caught some lead for it. But this false narrative that's passed around, or when the story doesn't fit the narrative, how quickly it disappears from the media, because they can only promote their narrative. And it really kind of makes you wonder about, what kind of times we're in here with when you have a media that only is interested in presenting one narrative. That's their liberal progressive narrative. And if a story doesn't fit it, once they, even though they didn't know that going into the story. They were hoping it was going to be a white Republican with an automatic weapon when they started it out. And once they found out who it was, it disappeared. It seems to be a corollary here that the length of time an article or a story appears in the news and is pushed by it is directly proportional to the agenda and to the person involved. If it's someone that fits their narrative that they think of as bad, then the story will stay around for a long time. If it doesn't, well, then the story will quickly disappear and they'll wait for their next one. So it doesn't really give you a good confidence about the state of the media in America right now. And you wonder when people start calling fake news that this is not exactly what they're talking about. All right. Hope everybody's having a good Easter weekend. Righty, Jim. Have a good day.